please cut military aid to Ukraine. Shut up, you goofy. Cracker thinks he can tell me what to do. 100% tariffs on Taiwanese microchips. Now. Yes, sir. Glory to the Chinese century. That Photoshop edit of Xi Jinping with the Chad jawline and that winning smile may have done more damage to American anti-China propaganda than anything the actual CCP could fund. Seriously, anytime something bad happens over here that just doesn't even exist as a problem in China, you just post a do nothing win meme with Chad Z, and you've probably successfully turned an impressionable 14-year-old into a CCP loyalist. It's the same thing that gets Gabe Newell praised year in, year out without ever dropping a new game. Hi again, fellas, and for better or for worse, we exist in a more interconnected world than ever before, and that only gets more true by the day. Global trade is the name of the game, where some countries make stuff and other countries buy that stuff. Not only that, but a revolution in communication makes it possible for you to be watching this video right now, and for me to make a living off a career that didn't exist 20 years ago. You can access this content from anywhere that has an internet connection, and that includes if it's illegal to do so where you are. You just need the right know-how. Truthfully, no digital barrier can stop anyone sufficiently motivated to talk to a stranger on the other side of the planet. And truth be told, they can do that with ease never before seen. It's been making cultural exchange more vibrant than ever, and bridging cultural gaps more of a possibility than it has before. Almost every country in the world relies on all the others in some way, even the ones that are actively beefing. Everybody has a speciality that the rest of the world can benefit from, but some nations have stronger feelings about each other, both positive and negative, than others. Over the last few decades of globalization and the spread of free trade, America has spent time deepening its ties with China. We outsourced our manufacturing to them. Companies took advantage of their cheap and huge labor force in order to allow a real big flow of stuff to come to the United States from China. Stuff we buy from them in the excess of hundreds of billions each year. Tons of American companies heavily rely on Chinese manufacturing to do their business, and just couldn't exist without it. And despite this level of cooperation and synergy, many Americans don't view this current relationship as a good thing. Many view China as America's greatest geopolitical rival in the modern day, akin to a Soviet Union, another rising power that seeks to usurp the United States' place on the world stage. The difference is that the Soviets were very clear that this was at least part of what they wanted to do, whereas China tends not to get into fights very much. And also, America's economy was not so inseparably tied with the Soviet Union's. With China, all that cheap labor we took advantage of has made us very reliant on them. Without properly decoupling these economies, which on its own would take decades and have its own challenges, any major action America tries to take economically against China to undo this risks causing some fucky-wuckies back home. Case in point, everything happening right now. Oh, tariffs. On Liberation Day, they scared the fuck out of everybody on Earth, including Americans. Other countries were butthurt that they were basically being penalized for the crime of selling stuff to America, basically just punished for doing trade with us so much. Meanwhile, Americans were shit scared because all of that epic stuff we like buying relies on that trade, and it was about to get a lot more expensive or not available at all. Less than a week after first announcing his so-called reciprocal tariffs, Trump decided to put a 90-day pause on all the tariffs he put onto other countries, lowering that rate to a very generous 10% baseline, with a few exceptions. I swear to God, I'm not trying to be CCP state-sponsored propaganda with the shit I'm talking in this video, but look at my president, dog. I'm going into a recession. Mexico and Canada still have 25% tariff rates as of writing this video, while we forced them to watch from the sidelines as we gave other countries the pass by stabbing them in the back a little less deeply. But hey, at least they are not in China's predicament, a full-on tit-for-tat trade war. China didn't get any tariff cuts. The White House was saying shit like, do not retaliate and you will be rewarded. Just take it like a good boy, roll over, and let us put these tariffs in you. Give us whatever we want, and we promise it'll feel good. In response, China basically told us to prolapse our own anus. At first, they hit back with a 34% tariff matching what Trump had originally slapped on China. Predictably, Trump didn't like that they decided to go band for band and upped the tariff rate on China to 84%. China was all, this is light work. I know you are richer than that. Let me see them racks. They matched that 84% tariff rate right back. Trump hits again, where around the same time he lowered the tariff rates on most other countries while negotiations with them were taking place. He first raised the active tariff rate on China to like 104%, but then went, it's not enough, and cranked it up even more to 125% tariffs on all Chinese goods. If these numbers feel meaningless at this point, then congrats, you're on the right track. At this point, we have a tariff rate against all imports from China so high that trade between us is now functionally non-existent. In most cases, it is just prohibitively expensive. And even if all these numbers that I hate reading disappeared tomorrow, the world wouldn't just bounce back unscathed unscathed. The scars left by America clawing out its own organs and shooting porcupine spikes in panic at the rest of the world do not heal easily. And China doesn't seem like they are willing to back down anytime soon on this. Like, they are running an all-time great PR campaign on this one. They are physically embodying that image of Xi Jinping just farming all the available aura in whatever city he was in. What they said boiled down to, listen, we try not to start fights, but don't think that we cannot finish them. By weaponizing tariffs to exert maximum pressure for selfish gains, the United States is pitching itself against the rest of the world. China's countermeasures are not only for safeguarding our own interests, but also for upholding international fairness and justice, the multilateral trading system, and the common interest of the international community. China doesn't want a trade war, but we will fight if we must. We're not gonna sit down and let anyone take away the Chinese people's legitimate rights and interests, or let anyone sabotage the international trade rules and multilateral trading system. They're doing this all at the same time that they're shouting out Speed for his live streams across China, sparking positive discussion and relations between the actual people in these two countries. And they're also retweeting clips of Ronald Reagan calling tariffs dog shit.
Yet today, protectionism is being used by some American politicians as a cheap form of nationalism. We should beware of the demagogues who are ready to declare a trade war against our friends, weakening our economy, our national security, and the entire free world.
Sounds like criticism of a pretty familiar situation, huh? This is subtitled in Mandarin and English. If you want to call this propaganda, then it's really fucking good propaganda. They're literally letting our own former leaders make the criticisms of the modern day America, and you can deploy the same video both in the States and back home, bro. It's pulling double duty. They're just straight dog walking us in the marketplace of ideas, and it almost feels like Trump just handed them the chance to present themselves as the bulwark, attempting to keep the world stable for everybody in it, while the old guard squabbles with its former allies both at home and across the world to try and extort concessions out of them. To be dramatic about it, it almost felt like they were given a chance to prove themselves a more capable steward of the world order, maybe even as the right hands to lead us into the future. I'm not saying I agree with that sentiment, this is just the discussion currently being had, but let's entertain that idea for a sec. In fact, let's discuss the Chinese century. For those of you who don't know what the Chinese century is outside of a few funny Trump memes, it actually refers to an existing term that has been used throughout the last few centuries. Pax Britannica, or Britain's imperial century, and for the purpose of this video, just the British century, was the period of time taken up most of the 1800s and in the very early 1900s when the British Empire was at the height of its power and pretty solidly established as the de facto superpower on Earth. Likewise, the 20th century is often referred to as the American century. In 1945, as Europe recovered from the devastation of World War II, Britain began its process of decolonization, and it declined in power from there. Meanwhile, America managed to escape the war virtually unscathed, with the war's actual battles never reaching the contiguous 48. The manufacturing capabilities the states developed for building weapons of war could now just build stuff, and they were better equipped to do it than just about any other nation on Earth. America used that power to rebuild the world in its image, creating a system of global trade that America sat at the center of. Sure, during the Cold War, they beefed hardcore with the Soviet Union on who was going to have cultural and economic control, and who would determine the vision for the world's future. But the 20th century went on, America continued to consolidate power, and when the Soviet Union shit the bed and collapsed in 1991, the United States was the last player in the Fortnite lobby, firmly establishing the 20th century as one of American dominance. Going into the new millennium, America emerged as the world's lone superpower and arbiter of trade. Some people were saying, we figured the whole thing out. This is the end of history, giving America the ability to establish cultural and political hegemony around the entire world. Now, in contrast, the Chinese century is not a thing yet. It's a hypothetical that basically posits that in the way British rule and culture defined the 19th century, and American culture defined the 20th, a rising China will similarly grow in power and eventually define the 21st century as their own. China initially got its boom when America outsourced its manufacturing needs overseas, so goods could be made and sold for much cheaper back in America. To do so, we gutted the US's own capacity to manufacture and set up China to become the new world's manufacturing hub. So from the bands they were making from that, China stacked their money long and tall enough into becoming the world's second largest economy. Fast forward to the current day, that is the position we find ourselves in now. An incredibly simplified version of the whole thing with a lot of details I definitely missed and that are important, but you get the point. With America's recent actions, nations around the world feel like America is kind of throwing in the towel, that we're up against the ropes. And it's like, if potential Chinese dominance is the threat we fear and the thing we don't want to happen, then us squabbling with our our own allies feels a little silly, especially when a lot of these guys were previously in lockstep with America's China foreign policy. They don't really feel like they can rely on us anymore, which, like, fair enough, which has already resulted in us pushing former butt buddies directly into China's arms as we make ourselves seem more like another antagonist instead of an ally. Here's an analogy that'll activate some sleeper cells in the audience. I only include this flashbang because maybe it'll make the position we find ourselves in click a little more clearly for some of y'all. Dude, I just realized the United States is like Drake, and China is like Kendrick Lamar. I don't want to be Drake. Wipe those tears off your eyes and think of something else so absurdly corny it circles back around to being a banger. Nothing is set in stone right now, but already China in the EU, who I guess in this metaphor could be seen as Playboi Carti getting 3 features from Kendrick on his recent album after only having collabed with Drake before, but the EU and China are already talking about potentially removing tariffs that Europe had put on Chinese electric vehicles just last year, instead setting a minimum price of sale for Chinese EVs so they can enter the European market again. These recent tariffs have put countries like Vietnam in a stinky position as well. Historically, Vietnam has tried to toe the line on its US-China relations, keeping in touch with both, where it exports the most amount of stuff to America, but its largest trading partner overall is China. They're caught in a situation where they might have to choose which market they prioritize having access to. And there are some out there who think this is genuinely the way things are meant to go, in like a really cosmic sense. Chinese international student in my class was telling me about how his evangelical dad in Beijing believes that Trump was chosen by God to win the election, but that this victory is part of a larger divine plan to destroy the United States. Some people take less of a supernatural, the Lord wills it perspective, and instead posit that Trump isn't so much chosen by God to destroy America, but actually just a true believer in the mission to secure China's national rejuvenation. Trump hands the world to China, The Atlantic writes, in a definitely real and not edited photo of Trump in Tiananmen Square wearing the uniform of the People's Liberation Army, is captioned as such. The bullet pierced my ear, but I can still hear the voice of the party. Good grief. And I mean, I don't know, for as big of a game as Trump talks about China and them ripping us off and that being something we gotta do something about, he seems to really like Xi Jinping as just a dude. He just thinks a lot of what he's able to pull off in China is cool. While talking with Joe Rogan, Trump said that he thinks it's based that Xi made it so he's president for life, and that we'll have to give that a shot someday. He's called Xi Jinping smart, brilliant, and everything perfect before, and literally just a few months ago described Xi like I do my Twitter oomps. All we want is fairness. We just want a level playing field. But I like President Xi very much. I've always liked him. Hell, even during this current lovers quarrel that we're having with China, he still found the time to glaze Xi Jinping on national television with some very heartfelt words.
I think President Xi is one of the very smart people of the world. He's a very smart man. He loves his country. I know that for a fact. I know him very well.
He talks about them like they were in the same fraternity back in college, and Xi was like the one other guy in the frat who was in touch with his emotions and able to actually strike up a real friendship with Donald. Trump seems to like genuinely want the best for Xi and wishes him luck. It must break his heart to be at odds with him like this. I bet he wants to just get it over with so they can hang out like old times. And maybe he figures the fastest way to do that is to secure Chinese hegemony already. I think China officially says their policy is not to seek hegemony, but whatever. The tariffs aren't even a political move. It's actually just one last gambit Trump's doing to get Xi to return his late night text. So all that said, like, what now? What is there even to do for people like us? Well, nothing really other than getting caught in the middle. We just don't have a choice in the matter, honestly. The bad news is this affects all of us, from the stuff we buy every day to folk who sell stuff of their own and rely on Chinese imports to do so. Like, there are already some companies that have folded overnight and won't be able to come back even if these tariffs got scrapped entirely. The good news is that I was able to send the shipments off to y'all from my merch last year before all of this shit happened. And I'm seeing some of you are starting to receive your stuff. If you ordered like any merch from me last year, whether it be the U2s, the G-Subs collection, or my box with Novel Horizons, feel free to tweet it at me using hashtag #QuiteLoot. I'll be retweeting and liking some of those as I start to see them come in, so if you want to, rock the swag, just let me know. I'm gonna wrap this video up here. I hope I didn't sound too doomer or like a state puppet. There is just kind of a funny, dramatic air right now that, with the way the US is acting, if it keeps going like this, it almost feels inevitable that China will come out ahead. Learning Mandarin as we speak to secure my children's future, but no one one really knows how this is gonna shake out by the very end. I'm still thinking about making that video on Xi Jinping aura farming to ridiculous degrees and some of the zanier shit in his backstory, but I'm afraid I may already be flying too close to the sun in my bid to become an official state apparatus of the CCP. They don't really like groupies, so I don't want to come off as one. And because of that, I'm asking you, the people, if you want that video. Be sure to drop a like if you enjoyed and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss an upload. Anyways, this has been Quite, and I'll see y'all next time.